¿Qué tal amigos? ¿Cómo están ustedes? Bienvenidos de vuelta al canal. ¿Cómo la están pasando? Feliz comienzo de semana para todos ustedes y que todo lo que se propongan lo puedan cumplir al 100%. Señores, en esta oportunidad vamos a hablar sobre Vivek Ramaswamy, que ha destruido a la presidenta del Partido Republicano, Ronna McDaniel, que suba al estrado y renuncie. Porque, señores, esta mujer está recibiendo una presión máxima debido a que el Partido Republicano, por parte de estas campañas, ha estado rota y se necesita una unión para fortalecer a los Estados Unidos y que gane las presidenciales del 2024 un sujeto republicano. Sí, señores, esta publicación la ha hecho Benny Johnson, donde dice lo siguiente: última hora, Vivek Ramaswamy destruyó Ronnie McDaniel, exige que suba al escenario y renuncie. Dice que Joe Rogan y Elon Musk deberían ser los anfitriones del debate, en lugar de la hacker como Kristen Welker, la periodista de color que impulsó el engaño de la colusión rusa. Eso es cierto, señores. Aquí tenemos una información donde dice fact checks. Esta periodista que ven en pantalla promovió la interacción de la colusión rusa entre Rusia y Donald Trump, en el cual la computadora portátil de Joe Biden supuestamente era una colusión rusa. Verificación de hechos. Esta mujer, Kristen Welker, la que ha entrevistado hace unas semanas a Donald Trump de NBC, promovió el engaño de la colusión rusa entre Donald Trump y Rusia. El candidato republicano a las primarias presidenciales, Vivek Ramaswamy, acusó el miércoles de la semana pasada por la noche a la moderadora del debate de NBC News, Kristen Welker, de promover previamente la conspiración de que el expresidente Donald Trump se confabuló con Rusia en las elecciones presidenciales de cierto. Esta mujer, mientras era corresponsal de NBC News en la White House, promovía habitualmente informes de su cadena y otros medios de comunicación, como el New York Times, que sugerían falsamente que Trump estaba en conexión con Rusia. Kristen, voy a aprovechar este tiempo porque en realidad se trata de ti, dijo Vivek Ramaswamy. Escuchen esto. Los medios y el establishment corrupto de los medios, dijo Vivek Ramaswamy, y le preguntaré, el engaño de la colusión entre Trump y Rusia, que usted impulsó en esta cadena durante años, ¿fue real o fue una desinformación inventada por Hillary Clinton? Responde la pregunta 20. Welker, en respuesta, ignoró la pregunta de Vivek Ramaswamy y los moderadores del debate rápidamente pasaron a otro candidato porque querían callar a Vivek Ramaswamy debido a que les dijo en su cara, le dijo a la cara a esta periodista que esta mujer estaba entrenada, estaba promoviendo, estaba empujando lo que tiene que ver con la colusión rusa entre Donald Trump y Vladimir Putin. De hecho, como afirmó Vivek Ramaswamy, la periodista Welker informó abundantemente a lo largo de los años sobre la conspiración de Trump-Rusia. En segmento del 2019, Welker le preguntó directamente a Trump si trabajaba con Rusia, con Vladimir Putin. Donald Trump dijo, nunca trabajé para Rusia, le dijo a Welker en ese momento, y también le dijo que era una vergüenza que ella hiciera la pregunta para empezar, considerando la evidencia extremadamente limitada de que el expresidente había trabajado con Rusia.
President Trump facing a blizzard of headlines
Miren
related to the Russia investigation and a bombshell report by the New York Times that the FBI opened up a counterintelligence investigation into Mr. Trump in 2017 amid concerns he wittingly or unwittingly was working for Russia. President Trump giving his firmest denial yet. The president saying, I never worked for Russia when I asked him the question directly today. The president also said it was a disgrace to ask that question in the first place.
Sí, señores, Welker era una periodista que se dedicaba básicamente a promover la colusión entre Rusia y Donald Trump. Era una mujer que se prestaba para estos establecimientos, contratada básicamente por los medios corporativos. En este momento Vivek Ramaswamy le dice en su cara, tú trabajaste y estabas empujando esta teoría de conspiración, era una teoría. Y en este momento está claramente verificado que eso es totalmente falso. ¿Qué piensas al respecto de lo que dijiste tú, de tus mentiras? Y la mujer no respondió absolutamente nada. Se quedó callada, señores. Ahora, durante una entrevista que tuvo Vivek Ramaswamy, un periodista le pregunta lo siguiente. El presidente Trump describe a las personas del 6 de enero como rehenes. Están enfrentando el Departamento de Justicia. Le preguntan a Vivek Ramaswamy si las personas del 6 de enero son rehenes. Miren este video.
Let me get to some issues. This week, Trump opened up a rally in Texas with the rendition of the national anthem sung by some of the January 6 rioters who broke into the Capitol. He went on to call them hostages. Do you agree with Trump that January 6 prisoners are hostages?
I think many peaceful protesters on January 6th should absolutely not be in prison. We have a dual standard of justice in this country. One standard applied
but Trump
to
is using the word
BLM
hostages. Do you think that they're hostages?
For the prior 2 years.
Isn't that irresponsible to call them hostages with what's going on in Israel right now?
I mean, Jim, let me just be really clear about what's irresponsible as it relates to coverage of Donald Trump. And I think that your network and others like you owe some accountability here. From the Russia collusion hoax that never was, to the Hunter Biden laptop story that was actually real before people before the election were told that it was false. So I think that the real accountability here belongs to the media. Speak the truth, admit accountability where you were wrong.
The question is whether you agree with them calling them hostages.
Were denied constitutional rights. Well, I think I agree with the spirit of it. The spirit of it is those people, many of them have been denied their constitutional rights, and many of them who were peaceful.
They're going through the justice process.
They're being prosecuted. Standard of the rule of law to them than somebody else. Well, I don't think that many of those prosecutions are just. My view is if you're using one standard of political prosecution for somebody because they have political views different from your own, that's not justice. That is injustice. And that's why I've said that anybody who is a peaceful protester on January 6th, for those peaceful protesters, they will earn a pardon from me on day one. And I will stand by that, Jim.
All right, and you made waves this week for the deal you said you would cut with Vladimir Putin to end Russia's war in Ukraine. Let's listen to this.
The most important element is Russia exit its military alliance with China. We make a hard commitment that NATO not admit Ukraine to NATO.
Tell me on this deal.
And then here we'd freeze the current lines of control.
What?
Freeze the current lines of control.
You would give Putin everything
I wouldn't
he's
give him
stolen?
anything. I would freeze the current lines of control.
Why would you cut a deal with Vladimir Putin? Why would you trust Putin to keep his end of a deal?
I don't trust Putin, but I trust Putin to follow his self-interest just as he can trust us to follow ours. And the fact of the matter is our engagement in Ukraine has been a disaster. Everybody in Ukraine would still tell you it's now stalled to a standstill. Tens, if not hundreds of thousands of deaths on both sides. Now the U.S. entering greater risk with Russia. The first time we've never had a nuclear non-proliferation agreement in place with Russia.
But
and secretly, many U.S. officials are beginning to admit that there has to be a deal.
Doesn't that show some naivete on your part?
We're going to have, to the contrary, the naivete is the pointless wars that we've spent in Iraq and Afghanistan. This is Iraq 2.0 unfolding again. Jim, if the people who were advocating for this war a year and a half ago are already meekly beginning to admit, even those you'll have on this network, beginning to admit that it was a failure, it has not met expectations, thousands and thousands of lives lost, greater risk, hundreds of billions of dollars later. This is a pointless war. So cut the losses now.
I think the Ukrainians have surprised a lot of people by taking it to the Russians. Why would you halt that progress?
The fact of the matter is the eastern parts of Ukraine that are occupied, well, the progress has already halted. The fact of the matter is, and you know, you can even read what the Ukrainian general just said this week. He first admitted that it's reached a standstill. So let's be sensible, do a reasonable deal that allows Ukraine to come out with its sovereignty intact, but pull apart the Russia-China military alliance. That's what nobody's talking about. We are driving Russia further into China's hands. We need to be focused on pulling them apart and make a commitment that NATO will not admit Ukraine to NATO. That is a sensible deal. You mark my words, this is where this is going to go eventually. We might as well go there now before more lives and more dollars are wasted.
Well, that to a lot of people sounds like a win for Putin.
Señores, adicional a esto, a Vivek Ramaswamy lo entrevistaron con respecto a algo que dijo en la plataforma X sobre el 9/11. Vivek Ramaswamy habla de lo sucedido sobre las Torres Gemelas y cita lo siguiente: creo que es legítimo decir cuántos policías, cuántos agentes federales habían en los aviones, sea 0 o probablemente sea 0. Por lo que sé, ¿verdad? No tengo razón para pensar que era algo distinto de 0. Pero si estamos haciendo una evaluación integral de lo sucedido del 9/11, tenemos una comisión del 9/11, esa debería ser una respuesta cuya respuesta la tienen ellos y el público conozca la verdad. Él dice que el gobierno de los Estados Unidos mintió sobre el 9/11, señores, y la vinculación con Arabia Saudita, que el pueblo merece saber la verdad del trasfondo, que fue lo que realmente sucedió. En este momento, Vivek Ramaswamy sabe o ha visto algo que quizás nosotros no sabemos aún. Está diciendo en los medios de comunicación, señores, que en el gobierno de los Estados Unidos hay algo más de trasfondo de la historia de las Torres Gemelas que no se quiere contar. ¿Qué no se quiere contar aquí? Algo pasó, señores. Hay algo más de trasfondo de las personas que estuvieron vinculadas a este ataque del 9/11 de las Torres Gemelas. Miren este video.
A report in the Atlantic that you gave an interview to, you said, quote, I think it is legitimate to say how many federal agents were on the planes that hit the Twin Towers. Maybe the answer is zero. It probably is zero for all I know, right? I have no reason to think it was anything other than zero, but if we're doing a comprehensive assessment of what happened on 9/11, we have a 9/11 commission. Absolutely, there should be an answer the public knows the answer to. Explain to me what you meant there.
This is really, it's funny. I mean, the Atlantic is playing the same game as CNN. It's funny. What I said is on January 6th, I do believe that there were many federal agents in the field and we deserve to know who they are. On 9/11, what I've said is that the government lied. And this is incontrovertible evidence, Caitlin. The government lied about Saudi Arabia's involvement. There was a Saudi spy named al-Bayoumi who they lied, and the government lied, and the 9/11 Commission lied. We know that because declassified reports in 2021 revealed that al-Bayoumi was indeed. What's that?
Yeah, the report that President Biden declassified. Yes. But your quote here, are you telling me that the quote is wrong
20 years later,
here?
Yeah.
But are you telling me that your quote is wrong here because it says how many federal agents were on the planes at the Twin Towers?
Yeah, when I actually, and this is just lifting the curtain on how media works again, I asked that reporter to send the recording because it was on the record. He refused to do it. But we had a free-flowing conversation. The truth is there are lies the government has told about 9/11, but it's not the ones that somebody put in my mouth. It's the one that I articulated, which is that Saudi Arabia, absolutely, their intelligence was involved in 9/11. And that's a difficult thing you're not supposed to say. The facts back that up. Separately, as it relates to January 6th, same story all over again. There were federal agents in the field. I think they've lied about how many there were, and we, the people, deserve the truth, despite the layers of distortion that exist in the media to prevent us from getting it.
You're saying that you were misquoted here, so we will take you at your word. Yes. You're saying that you were misquoted here, but you were asked another time recently about whether or not 9/11 was an inside job. This is what your response was.
9/11 inside job, or exactly how the government tells us?
I don't believe the government has told us the truth. Again, I'm driven by evidence and data. What I've seen in the last several years is we have to be skeptical of what the government does tell us. I haven't seen evidence to the contrary, but do I believe everything the government told us about it? Absolutely not.
Last two questions.
The 9/11 Commission? Absolutely not.
I mean, Vivek, I think people look at those comments. They look at what you said in the Atlantic, which you say you were misquoted. They look at comments that you've made about the Federal Reserve adding zeros to media companies' bank accounts. And I mean, it looks like you're floating conspiracy theories with this defense of I'm just asking questions.
Well, when you actually quote me, those are my words, and I stand by them. So somebody else quoting me, putting words in my mouth, I have a problem with. But those words I stand by. You want to know why? Because we literally know the FBI, the 9/11 Commission, the U.S. government on down, told us specifically that Saudi Arabia had no involvement. 20-plus years later, quietly declassifying documents showing that not only did Saudi Arabia have involvement, it was a Saudi intelligence agent that received two of those terrorists that crashed planes on 9/11, killing Americans.
But the question was, is 9/11 an inside job? And you didn't say no.
Caitlin,
that's what I think people are looking at.
Caitlin, you know what's really funny? You literally just played that, and you could play it for your audience again. He said, or do you believe everything the government has told us? And my answer was, I do not believe everything the government has told us
but you see
because
the
they
point.
lied.
The point is
and
that
I know
it leaves
this game
the door
comes up,
open.
Caitlin, every time there's an outsider who comes in.
It leaves the door open, Vivek. It leaves the door open, and someone who's
Caitlin,
a 9/11 truther looks at that and says, that's exactly what I believe. You think the government's lying about 9/11?
I think the government has systematically and for a very long time lied about 9/11. And I think I'm the only presidential candidate who has told us the truth. Saudi Arabia's involvement. It is absolutely true.
But you don't
that
think that 9/11 was an inside job, correct?
Of course not. And I've never said it. But the media filters do create a lot of falsehoods.
It's not a media filter. You have to stop blaming the media. I'm asking you about comments that you have made.
And I'm telling you that the comments I made, the ones you just played, are indeed what I believe, which was not that 9/11 was an inside job, but that Saudi Arabia absolutely was involved, and our government for 20 years lied to the American people about it.
There was an entire 9/11 Commission report on this.
Yes, and it lied, and it was false. And in fact, you know where that's coming out, Caitlin? There's now a federal case in the Southern District of New York, where the government of Saudi Arabia is being sued by victims of families. That's why this is resurfacing itself. It is relevant, and it turns out
But there's a difference in asking questions about Saudi Arabia's involvement and the government's involvement, and then pushing this idea that what your comment about who was on the plane and then was 9/11 an inside job where you did not say no earlier. That's why it's important to clarify those comments, because otherwise it feels like you're towing the line when it comes to conspiracy theories.
Caitlin, I am guilty as charged that I do not follow the establishment super PAC donor-approved script on these questions, but I am speaking truth, grounded in fact, at every step of the way, and that's what's really elicited something of an anaphylactic reaction of the kind we saw in 2016 against a different candidate. But this time I'm going to be grounded in principles and conviction, not just vengeance and grievance, which is exactly how we will reunite this country.
You're grounded in evidence. That's just simply what we were asking for. But Vivek Ramaswamy, we'll have to leave it there. Thanks so much for your time tonight.
Desde las primeras semanas después de los ataques del 11 de septiembre, la sospecha sobre un posible papel del gobierno saudí en el complot se ha centrado en un misterioso estudiante de posgrado de 42 años que dio la bienvenida a los dos primeros secuestradores de Al-Qaeda después de que aterrizaron en Los Ángeles en enero del 2000, mucho antes del ataque. El estudiante saudita Omar al-Bayoumi afirmó haber conocido a los dos terroristas por pura casualidad, supuestamente. Dijo que simplemente estaba siendo hospitalario cuando los ayudó a establecerse en San Diego. Tanto el FBI como la comisión del 9/11 apoyaron el relato de Bayoumi, descartando las sospechas de los agentes que pensaban que podría ser un espía saudí también. Sin embargo, después de casi 20 años, el FBI ha cambiado su historia. En documentales clasificados el año pasado, la oficina afirmó que este sujeto era en realidad un agente del servicio de inteligencia saudita que trabajaba con funcionarios religiosos sauditas y reportaba al poderoso embajador del reino en Washington. Esas revelaciones se han convertido en un punto central de discordia en una demanda federal de larga duración en Nueva York, donde los sobrevivientes al 9/11 y los familiares de las 2.977 personas que murieron buscan responsabilizar al gobierno saudita por estos ataques. Señores, en este momento hay muchas historias que no se están contando, hay muchos relatos que no se están contando y que el gobierno federal de los Estados Unidos trata de ponerlo en una cúpula, de ponerlo de una manera bastante hermética, porque no quiere que las personas sepan lo que realmente sucedió en el 9/11. Déjame saber tu opinión en las barras de los comentarios. ¿Qué piensan ustedes de lo que dijo Vivek Ramaswamy sobre el 11 de septiembre? Ahora bien, lo más importante de todo esto. Vamos a compartir este video, señores, a través de las redes sociales. Vamos a compartirlo por WhatsApp, por Facebook, por Instagram, por Telegram, por X, por True Social. Porque las personas merecen saber la verdad y merecen saber este tipo de información. Entonces, si tienes a un familiar o un amigo o una persona cercana, inclusive un vecino, un amigo, compártele este video en las redes, compártele este video, no cuesta nada. Adicional a esto, regálame un gran like como forma de apoyo a este canal, suscríbete, muy importante, suscríbete, activa la campanita para que la plataforma te notifique cuando suba un nuevo video. Nos vemos, señores, en unas horas con un próximo video importante para todos ustedes como tanto se lo merecen. Hasta luego.